Even after it is clearly explained that dogs do not intentionally bark for any specific purpose, dog defenders continue to insist, quite adamantly, that dogs bark for X or Y reason. And I think there is a bit of a confusion. What the dog apologist is trying to do is explain what the dog's barking is supposed to be accomplishing. But that is not the same as dogs themselves knowing why they bark when they do so. There is no reason to believe dogs have this level of self-awareness. For example, they will tell us that dogs bark to alert their owners, but there is no evidence that dogs are barking specifically for this reason. What we do know from observing them is that they do indeed bark. But as I pointed out in a video, a dog in a yard will bark at everything passing by, whether their owner is home or not. So who are they supposedly trying to alert? Once again, you could have only one dog on the planet and it will still bark. You could put that same dog, or any dog, in a backyard area in a ghost town where no one lives, and you can bet bottom dollar that this dog will exhibit the same mindless behavior. It is one thing to claim that the barking serves some purpose in the world external to the dog, and this can also be scrutinized, and quite another to ascribe intentionality. Or in other words, there is no good reason to believe that a dog is conscious of just why the hell it is barking. Dogs are highly instinct-driven, and they don't sit and ponder why they do the things they do. Even if they did, we would have no way of knowing if that is the case, because dogs cannot tell us about it, since they cannot speak. But given how they are creatures that run purely on instinct, there is, again, no good reason to suspect that they are conscious of why they do any of the things they do. Dogs run on instinct, and barking is no exception. And, in point of fact, barking is a dog's automatic response to just about everything and anything. It is reflexive, and dog barking in particular is a result of human intervention. The artificial selection process dogs and their progenitors were subjected to. That is the only reason dogs bark the way they do. Even in other canines who possess the capability to bark, they do not bark incessantly, like dogs do. The way they use barks is very different from the way dogs do it, and they do so very sparingly. Adult wolves in the wild will seldom do so. If they barked the way dogs do, they would constantly give away their position, and they would not survive. Many dogs really do bark at literally everything in their surroundings. It is no exaggeration to say this. Nature would never have produced an animal that conducts itself in this manner, and it is already well established that dogs are themselves a byproduct of human intervention in the natural world. In the whole of the animal kingdom, dog barking is a very aberrant behavior.
In the beginning, you must think of nothing but silence, a silence so vast that the ear can hear it. These are the eaters of grass in a world of torn flesh. Early the little fawns must learn the lesson. Feet that make no noise, eyes that see in the dark, ears that hear the leopard leaving his lair.
Once again, it doesn't matter why dog apologists think these defective creatures bark. Dog barking is very out of place in modern cities and human settlements in general. The people making excuses for this behavior will continually ignore the following contention. When a dog outside sees us walking by, it will come running towards the fence, and it will jump or lunge towards us whilst barking. Many dogs likewise have this reaction when they are being walked by their owners and thus restrained. So it bears repeating, even when dogs are restrained or somewhat contained, they will not leave us alone. These fanatics insist that dogs are communicating with their owners. But whether that is the case or not, we do not need to hear it. And we do not appreciate these critters barking, snarling, growling, lunging and sprinting towards us, which is something they often do the moment they spot us. These are all menacing gestures. The only thing they are communicating is how out of place they are on human settlements and that they wish to attack us for no reason. When dogs bark directly at us, this is very menacing and unwanted. Dog defenders refuse to confront this criticism. They would rather reframe the dog's aggression as a harmless form of communication, ignoring all the unwanted effects it causes in the external world. As we already know full well, dogs engage in a great number of undesirable behaviors, even from the vantage point of people who actually choose to be around dogs. This can be evidenced by training, which is a basic requirement to get a dog to become more tolerable than it would be in its natural default state. From the dog's odor and intrusiveness to its mindless aggression and hyperactivity, dogs possess many negative qualities which make them a source of aggravation for humans. Additionally, many aspects of dog behavior, as well as dog ownership in general, and the way dogs are managed, or not, make dogs a public health and safety hazard. Dogs are also a liability, as well as an environmental, as well as social, pollutant. Dogs cause a whole host of widespread problems, ranging from public defecation to unwanted noise pollution of the kind that carries for quite a distance. Other problems include the dog's unwarranted hostility towards people, even when dogs are said to be under control. But the point is this: in general, dogs cause entirely too many problems in society for their widespread ownership to be justified any longer. Now, dog fouling is typically defined as the offense of being in charge of a dog and failing to remove the feces after it defecates in a public place. But every one of these dogs will still be defecating in public, will it not? So, I refer to contamination rather than just fouling. But it's a bad thing whether people pick up after their dogs or not. You see, every dog is a potential source of personal misery for someone. Even if every dog in an area doesn't bite, others will, and at least some of them will still intrude on people, or bark up a storm in an otherwise peaceful neighborhood, and all of them will crap everywhere. Collectively, all dogs have severe detrimental impacts on local environments and public health. Now, dog fouling is typically defined as the offense of being in charge of a dog and failing to remove the feces after it defecates in a public place. But every one of these dogs will still be defecating in public, will it not? So, I refer to contamination rather than just fouling. But it's a bad thing whether people pick up after their dogs or not. You see, every dog is a potential source of personal misery for someone. Even if every dog in an area doesn't bite, others will, and at least some of them will still intrude on people, or bark up a storm in an otherwise peaceful neighborhood, and all of them will crap everywhere. Collectively, all dogs have severe detrimental impacts on local environments and public health. There are many single issues caused by dogs which, even if dogs cause no other problems, would be enough reason to oppose dog ownership. And so it is with barking. Even if they did nothing else undesirable, the fact that they bark the way they do would be reason enough to strictly prohibit and disallow their ownership, sale, possession, and all the rest of it. This is something I have mentioned several times in the past as well. At a minimum, dogs would be barred from towns and cities on this basis. But even in rural areas, and even for landowners with few neighbors and none nearby, this scourge is inescapable. Barking is terrible because it is a completely needless, useless, and awful sound. In many neighborhoods it is interminable. It is infernal, insufferable, torturous, and every bit as persistent as it is pervasive. Despite it being so obviously obnoxious and disruptive, it is widely accepted as normal, even deemed acceptable or, quote, natural, and defended aggressively by inconsiderate and deeply troubled dog-enabling psychopaths. As I mentioned in my previous video, one of the things I have always hated about dogs is the way they randomly harass and threaten pedestrians and passerby with their barking and other aggressive advances. These vermin will bark incessantly whilst moving rapidly and determinedly towards you when they are behind a barrier, such as a gate or a fence. Dogs will also rage at us from behind screens, closed doors, patio and porch balconies, and even from behind the windows of moving cars and trucks. As I have previously shown, Dogs will also regularly break through glass to get to delivery workers and the like. This is not only about the barking, mind you. The barking is a sign of hostility and should always be taken as an intent to cause bodily harm. After all, that is what a dog will often do when it is not restrained at all. It will attack. The barking comes as the dog is racing towards something or someone it wishes to attack. In general, barking is an incredibly uninviting, off-putting and abrasive behavior, even if it is not always an indication of a possible attack. So the point is moot, really. This is a terrible quality for a living creature to possess and embody. The common domestic dog has become so normalized in our world that many people have forgotten, or perhaps have never learned, of just precisely what dogs are and why they behave the way they do. One might think that those who actually own dogs and who defend the cause of dogs should be the ones who know the most about them. And of course, many of them know exactly how dogs behave. After all, how could they not? It's just that they are usually in denial about what dogs actually are, or why they behave the way they do. Surely we've all heard the whitewashed pop history of the dog. And indeed, most will only have absorbed the idealized version of what dogs are like. Most will have heard the sanitized fables and folk tales of the dog as man's best friend, as a loyal companion. Many will even repeat complete falsehoods about the supposed healing properties of the dog's saliva. Often omitted or overlooked are the many sayings about dogs, which more accurately depict them as something that is not to be trusted. For example, the well-known saying, "Bite the hand that feeds." Although I am reminded of the film They Live, wherein one of the characters discovers a pair of sunglasses which make the world appear different and reveal what was once hidden, the dreadful truth is that this reality hides in plain sight. I have often pondered aloud why it is that humans have such a duteous relationship to a creature that is so foreign, and which is so openly hostile to their species as a whole. It goes beyond duty and deference, as this relationship can even be described as subservience and kowtowing. There is a misplaced sense of affection, allegiance, and obligation to the dog. We are the only species that artificially breeds and maintains a predatory carnivore. The dog is given everything, often quite literally on a platter. The inquiry into this question has led me to consider the tale of Victor Frankenstein and his monstrous creation, which he assembles from old body parts. The monster is freakishly strong but has the brain capacity of an infant. In the novel by Mary W. Shelley, the man's creation ends up ruining his life. Based on those details alone, I think this story is an apt metaphor for the domestic dog, even if it was never the author's intention. Now, there is a saying which is often attributed to the Nazi Joseph Goebbels. It goes like this: if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. How can dogs be our best friends when they are not even cut out to be domestic house pets? For you see, despite the dog's popularity as a mainstream household pet, dogs were never actually intended to be pets at all. Even today, their psychology and comportment are such that a dog and a person living in a modern house with indoor plumbing and all the rest of it would be very much at odds with one another. For that matter, these days there are countless dog owners who keep dogs of varying sizes trapped in tiny flats. Although hundreds of distinct breeds have been created for various purposes, none of them have any characteristics that would make them good pets. We will come back to revisit this a little later. In their current form, dogs exist because they are profitable. But they are, as one internet poster put it, obsolete farm equipment. Long before dogs were touted as household pets, they were exclusively used for practical purposes and were essentially a tool to be utilized by humanity to suit its own aims. Dogs were first used for hunts, back when early humans were still living in bands, tribes, and clans as nomadic hunter-gatherers. And of course, the emergence of agriculture separated Neolithic peoples from their Paleolithic predecessors. It is often stated that dogs played a vital role in the endeavours of Neolithic populations, where they were now used for purposes such as herding and protection of property. It is at this point that we should pause to consider a couple of very important details. While the history of the dog as a working animal is fairly well documented, we should also keep in mind that the dog's importance is often heavily overstated, and, from a zoological perspective, the history concerning the origins of the dog remains shrouded in mystery. While dogs are most often associated with their role as working animals within these contexts, that is to say hunting and farm work, the Neolithic Revolution ultimately gave rise to the age of industrialization. By the 1800s, the usage of turnspit dogs had already spread from Europe to America. This practice began in European kitchens and involved dogs running in treadmills to turn roasting spits. Dog advocates everywhere would have you believe that the clumsy canines you run into on the streets and in people's houses today are purely the result of centuries of mutual bonding as well as domestication or taming, when in fact they've come down from wolves and exist entirely due to a relationship born of necessity and convenience. But they are just as much a product of the Victorian Industrial Revolution. For you see, it is equally important to understand the role of technological development. Many of us take the historical transformation from feudalism to capitalism for granted. We assume that the time period in which we find ourselves is eternally valid and transhistorical. We look at our present material conditions and all our modern conveniences and seldom seriously entertain the idea of living any other way. And it is sometimes difficult to envision a pre-industrial existence. What I am getting at is this: dogs were simply the best that humans could do at one time. As the technological context of an era changes, so too do the tools that we use, the values we hold, the rights we enjoy, and the possibilities we can reasonably entertain. Looking back at the various different uses for dogs in history and prehistory, we see that the practical applications varied and changed as humans went from one mode of living to another. Remember, the Industrial Revolution radically altered the way we live. It bears repeating that dogs were used in a number of ways outside the farm, and pet ownership as we know and understand it today wasn't widely accepted until nearly the end of the 17th century, and it is almost certainly a Victorian construct. Dogs, for most of their inclusion in human endeavours, were more akin to beasts of burden rather than family pets, and all the rest of it. Basically, their usage by humankind is an exploitative one, and the original purposes for which most dogs were bred are as much a thing of the past as manual elevators controlled by a large lever. It is crazy to think that we're still finding supposed uses for a dumb animal that has its genesis in a time when women were strong enough to break your heart the old-fashioned way by pulling it straight out of your chest. Of course, there is only circumstantial evidence that Neanderthals or Homo erectus began the domestication of dogs some 100,000 years ago. To come back to the point about how dogs are not even cut out to be household pets, there is an informative Reddit post which I have shared before and which is titled "Dog Owners Don't Understand That Dogs Were Bred for Specific Purposes." It reads as follows.
Almost no dogs were bred for modern house living. You would want a dog that didn't drool or shed, didn't bark, was low energy, did not require regular walking, used a litter box like a cat, and was actually easier to train. But there are no dogs that fit this description because no dogs were intended to be modern house pets.
My intention here is not to endorse modern pet keeping, nor am I condemning it in this video. I am simply pointing out that dogs don't even seem to be well suited for this purpose. Pit bulls and Cane Corsos are among the better examples of dogs kept in households despite never having been bred for any such purpose, even by some stretch of the imagination. But remember, none of them were ever really bred for such purposes. The fact that you have to train dogs so that they don't violently attack you or other members of your household or other pets really sets it in stone now, doesn't it? Dogs are also inherently destructive, and many dog owners either lock their massive beasts up in cages all day or drag them everywhere for fear that their so-called pet will totally destroy the inside of their house while they are away. To say nothing of having to train them to use the bathroom outside, when their natural tendency is to go anywhere. Dogs never evolved, and nor were they bred to live in close quarters with humans. They remain wild at heart, and would frankly prefer to run around chasing sheep all day and rolling around in carcasses. Anti-dog YouTuber Canine Critic made a great post some years ago, which I have saved. That post reads as follows.
I think it is pretty cruel to keep a dog as an indoor pet, because they are so unsuitable for that lifestyle. They need a lot of attention, but humans need to go to work for 8 hours a day. They need lots of space to run, but not many humans live on a farm. They like being gross, but humans don't like that. Their predatory drift makes mauling and killing things fun for them, and humans don't like being mauled and killed.
The fact is, our lifestyles are incompatible. Dogs do require an inordinate amount of attention just in general, and much of this just so that the dog does not engage in deliberate acts of violence against other living things, promiscuous defecation and urination, and unbridled property destruction. It's a lot of work just to make something somewhat tolerable and only minimally destructive. Even outside of work, people have families. They have relationships to maintain, hobbies to engage in, and all the rest of it. Dog ownership is very harmful for human society, but on the flip side, human society is also not the best for dogs themselves. It is a forced relationship. Being alive itself is a source of infirmity for the domestic dog, given that they all suffer from a number of breed-specific disabilities and maladies. Just what the hell are we doing?